wedging table. This is where you'll wedge your clay, but you need to check the table to make sure it's kind of cleaned off before you put wet clay on it. And that's what these tools are for. So sometimes we need to scrape dried up clay crumbs. You need to scrape them off. Otherwise, you're gonna get dry clay into your wet clay and you're gonna be very upset about that. So scrape and then dust it off. And then this is garbage. Okay, you'll just dump it into the garbage. Okay. Now, because of COVID, my hands will be the only ones going into the clay bucket. So I'll be handing you your 3 pounds. 3 pounds is a great amount to start with because as a beginner learning how to wedge, you really don't want more than that. It'll be too much for you to handle. But also, our first projects, we're building small, remember, 6 inches. And so 3 pounds goes far. You also don't want so much clay that you know, it winds up drying out before you can even use it. So 3 pound increments are good. There it is. Okay, and then always be sure to cover up the bucket. All right, so the way to start wedging is to take all this clay that you can see is full of air and compress it down. And I just use gravity for that. So I just drop it and I turn it every which way until I get like a cube shape. And it does not have to be perfect. Okay, so cube it. Now, why do we wedge? Get the air out. Okay? If we don't, if we have an air pocket in whatever we build, it will burst in the kiln. 100% guaranteed. So we've got to make sure that the clay we're starting with has all the air out. And the way to do that, it looks like you're kneading dough. Has anybody ever done that? Kneaded dough? Okay. But when you do that, that's the opposite actually of wedging. Because when you're kneading dough, you're actually pushing air in. That's how you get dough to rise. So making sure that you wedge the right way is important because there's a way you can do it where you're actually adding air. We don't want that. We want to push air out, okay? So the way to start is to take your hands, put them on the sides of your cube, okay? And then because it's a cube, you want to use like these corners and roll it up on a corner. Okay, see how it's on a corner? Put my hands on the sides and then I'm going to push forward. All right? Now notice I'm standing for a reason. Wedging is a rocking motion that you need to do with like your upper body. It's not just with your hands or your wrists. It cannot be. It's too much clay on your hands and wrists. It will hurt your hands and wrists, plus you won't get full wedging motion, okay? So stand up, give it a push, and then pull it back up. Hands on the sides, push forward a little bit, let it rock, and then bring it back to you. Hands on the sides, give a little push, let it rock, bring it back to you. Hands on the sides, give a little push, let it roll up like that, okay? Bring it back. Now let me show you some not to-dos. When I'm pushing forward, I'm not smearing forward, okay? I get a lot of smears. Like, you don't need that much pressure, you know? So, no smears, okay? The other thing is if you don't keep your hands on the side and you just kind of got your hands open and you're just pushing it down, what's going to happen is after you do that a few times, it's gonna keep rolling out this way, and then I call it a hot dog. We don't want a hot dog. Let me show you what it looks like if you're doing it correctly. Hands on the side, push forward a little bit, and bring it back towards you. Hands on the side. My hands being on the side, okay, what they're doing is they're pushing inward and keeping that clay right here and not rolling into a hot dog, okay? Now when you get really good at this, then it all becomes one fluid motion. And you can't see me like stopping and putting my hands on the side and pushing. It just becomes one fluid motion. And students will ask me, well, how do I know if I'm done? Well, the best way to do this is for every 3 pounds, do 50 rotations. So I'll have my intro kids, up here wedging and counting. That's normal. They're not weird, it's normal. Okay, now, if you're doing it right, what you will have, it's called a ram's head. It has nothing to do with our school. That's the type of wedging this is. Or it kind of looks like you have the horns on the side, and then down here at the snout, you should see folds. Okay? If it kind of looks like that, you're doing it right. The folds mean that you're pushing air out. These horn-like things, this is where my hands are, keeping the clay together and not into a big hot dog. And it should be dimensional, not flat, smeared, okay? Once you do 50 rotations, use gravity again, put it back into a cube. You want your wedged clay to stay compressed because that will keep it moist longer, okay? So once you got it cubed, then you will take plastic from the red barrel, wrap it in plastic, okay? The clay that goes home will go home. The clay that stays here. Let's say you're at home and you're working with clay and you're doing all the things you need to do. Right, and you wind up with scraps, because you're going to, You're going to have little pieces of clay that are extra scraps. And if they're still soft and nice wet clay stage, you want to keep those, okay? Don't waste them. So you take your scraps and you pile them up like that. Well, by taking all these scraps and smushing them together, what do you think I've just done? I just trapped a bunch of air in there, okay? So even if you have a bunch of scraps and you want to reuse this, you've got to wedge it. Now, there's an easy way to do it if you have a small amount, because look at this little tiny amount of clay. Oh my gosh, it's too small for me to ram's head wedge. So what you can do is take that clay and they call it finger wedge. So in my hand, I'm squeezing it, but I'm turning it around so that I'm squeezing it from every angle and position possible, and then compress it. Now I feel safe to reuse this clay, but make sure at home you do that. Okay. Good. Questions about